Here's a detailed look at the United Launch Alliance Atlas V mission profile.
5, 4, 3, 2. We have ignition of the RD-180 main engine. 1. Liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket.
The Atlas V RD-180 main engine ignites and generates more than 860,000 pounds of thrust to lift the rocket away from the pad. Shortly after liftoff, Atlas begins a pitchover to attain the proper flight path while minimizing the pressure the vehicle experiences during flight. The Atlas V reaches Mach 1 at the speed of sound at 1 minute 17 seconds. At 4 minutes 4 seconds, propellant levels deplete and the main engine shuts down. 6 seconds later, the Atlas Centaur separation system activates to release the booster stage. The vehicle now weighs a little more than 7% of what it did at liftoff. At 4 minutes 20 seconds, the first Centaur main engine burn begins, sending the Centaur into a circular orbit. Approaching payload fairing jettison, the Centaur is burning propellant at a rate of 51 pounds per second, traveling at more than 10,000 miles per hour, and located 79 miles in altitude and 252 miles downrange. During ascent, InSight is protected inside a 4-meter diameter payload fairing. At approximately 4 minutes 28 seconds, the payload fairing is jettisoned. At 13 minutes 16 seconds, cutoff of the Centaur main engine, or MECO-1, occurs. The mission now enters an hour-long coast phase. At nearly 1 hour and 15 minutes, the Centaur main engine is restarted for the second and final burn, placing Centaur on its path to spacecraft separation. Approximately 4 minutes and 49 seconds later, the final cutoff of the Centaur main engine occurs. At 1 hour, 28 minutes, and 40 seconds, Centaur releases NASA's InSight spacecraft on its journey to Mars. Deploying from dispensers mounted on the aft bulkhead carrier on Centaur, the Mars Cube 1, or MARCO CubeSats, will provide real-time communication relay covering the entry, descent, and landing of InSight on Mars. MARCO A separates 1 hour, 29 minutes into flight, followed 48 seconds later by the separation of MARCO B.
Go Atlas. Go Centaur.
Go InSight.
5, 4, 3, 2, 0. And liftoff of the Atlas V, launching the first interplanetary mission from the West Coast, and NASA's InSight, the first outer space robotic explorer to study the interior of Mars.
Audio rates continue to look good. Closed loop guidance has begun. And we have indication of payload fairing jettison. Looks like a good step.
And the payload fairing that was encapsulating the InSight spacecraft has been jettisoned. That confirmation of spacecraft separation. Behind us in the room, a lot of excited people.
InSight is flying on United Launch Alliance's Atlas V 401 configuration and has a 2-hour launch window starting at 4:05 this morning Pacific Time or 7:05 Eastern Time. This means that launch teams have 2 hours to lift off from Space Launch Complex 3 at Vandenberg Air Force Base. InSight is set to land on November 26th in the Elysium Planitia region of Mars, which is about 373 miles from the Gale crater, where NASA's Curiosity rover touched down in August 2012. After InSight lands, it will spend 728 days, or a little over a Martian year, studying the planet's interior. InSight will be the red planet's first thorough checkup since it formed 4.5 billion years ago. InSight will take the vital signs of Mars, specifically its pulse, its temperature, and its reflexes. After the spacecraft's roughly 6-month journey to Mars, it will begin its landing phase. InSight enters the Martian atmosphere traveling at 13,200 miles per hour and deploys its parachute and ultimately slows down to about 5 miles per hour for touchdown. 1 minute later, InSight will begin its surface operations, checking out the lander's health indicators and then deploying its solar arrays. It will take about 10 weeks to place all the instruments on the ground. About 7 weeks later, it will sink its self-hammering heat probe about 10 to 16 feet into the Martian soil. There are also 2 briefcase-sized CubeSats known as Mars Cube 1, or MARCO, hitching a ride on today's mission as a part of a NASA technology demonstration mission. MARCO A and MARCO B will deploy from the second stage of the Atlas V about a minute after InSight separates and will then fly toward Mars.
Stephanie, Jim has a ton of energy. He's been up over 24 hours. Let's take it back to you.
Thanks so much. The journey to today's launch has been a long time in the making. Here's a highlight reel of all of the work that the teams here at Vandenberg Air Force Base have done to prepare for today's launch.
So what Mars InSight lander is going to allow us to do is really map the inside of Mars. This is an important mission, not just for the United States, but an important mission for the world, so we can better understand why planets change and ultimately understand even more about our own planet. I think the one thing that really excites everybody is a question that we ask ourselves over and over again, which is, are we alone in the universe? Is there potential for life on a planet that's not our own? And one of the things that we want to do with Mars 2020, which is going to launch during the next window we have to go to Mars, is understand if there was a potential, or maybe even Mars might have at one time hosted life. If we want to get as much science as we can, as fast as we can, we need to get really good at using robots. We're going to have robotic missions to the moon before we have humans go to the moon, so that we can get the most out of our human science missions. And that's true on Mars as well. This president and vice president are very committed to getting America back to the surface of the moon as fast as possible. Earth, because we live here. And it's the only planet we know that can host life, so we better take care of it. When I was 5 years old, they made us draw what we wanted to be when we grew up, and I drew a picture of an airplane. I had a picture of myself there wearing a hat that I thought airline pilots wore. As a pilot in the Navy, I became very dependent on space-related capability. And a lot of the technologies that come from NASA have multiple uses and have transformed the way we live our lives. So people say, why are you interested in space? I think the question is, why wouldn't you be interested in space? It's critical to our everyday lives. So this is a critical mission for our country. It's a critical mission for the world. These are some of the brightest minds that our country has. We've got great international partners, and our nation is grateful, and in fact the world is grateful for their service.